And I'll call the regular meeting of the Board of Education of January 19, 2022 to order. We have regrets from Trustee Stelk, but I believe the balance of the board is here. I welcome members of the senior management team, including Superintendent Eberwin, Assistant Superintendent McKenzie, Secretary Treasurer Reed, Director of Instruction Braniff, and Director of Instruction Hunter. We also have our partners representing COPAC, Ms. Ashley Sinofsky, I think, or is it Monique Hiltz?
Monique passes along her regrets this evening. She's not feeling well.
Do we have a representative, Superintendent?
Craig Morton is here.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Morton.
Thank you, Chair.
We also have representing CUPE, Ms. Nola Welsh. Representing the Saanich Teachers Association, its president, Mr. Michael McEwen, and representing the Saanich Administrators Association, Mr. David Mark. And we have a number of guests as well. Welcome to you all. Of course, we want to acknowledge and respect and honor the fact that we are this evening meeting on the traditional lands of the Saanich peoples who have lived, worked, and learned on these territories since time immemorial, and we offer our thanks and gratitude for this. Moving to the adoption of the agenda, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Trustee Vanwell, seconded by Trustee McMurphy. Are there any proposed late items or revisions to the agenda? All right, I'll put the question. All in favor of adopting the agenda as circulated, please signify. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Prior to this regular meeting, the board held an in-camera meeting at which it discussed personnel matters and facilities matters. I saw a hand, but I'm not sure to whom it belongs. Can you assist me, Mr. Reed?
I see Trustee Martin stand up.
Trustee Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Chair Dunford, I'd like a point of personal privilege, please.
Yes, please proceed.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. It is my privilege to be a school board trustee in Saanich School District these past 7+ years. Saanich School District has been a part of my family's lives for over 25 years with our 3 children's journey through Saanich schools, and then in my role as trustee for Saanich School District. What I've always appreciated about Saanich School District is the respect for our stakeholders and the community in our work each day. We're in a unique position here in Saanich where we're not so large that trustees cannot touch down in the schools and be connected in our communities to hear of what is happening, what is of utmost importance to our schools and the staff within these schools and the community members that are connected to our schools. This is a gift and is immeasurably valuable for our role as governors. These relationships need to continue to be authentically nurtured and respected and room made for hard conversations. Prior to 2018, Saanich, like many other districts, had seen over a decade of funding pressures and cuts. During all these years, the conversations and consultations and process of hearing our stakeholders' perspectives and concerns was a great privilege, and the underpinning to relationships surviving incredibly difficult operational implications for our schools and students. I know that this should not be taken for granted, and I'm so thankful for the trust and honesty our district stakeholders have brought to the conversations within the district and here at the board table. As many of you are aware, I started a job at Crown Agencies and Board Resourcing Office in the Ministry of Finance 3.5 years ago, giving a steadily increasing workload that is to be even heavier this year. I am sadly giving notice of my resignation effective January 31st. I take my trustee responsibilities very seriously, and I'm not comfortable in having to miss committee, budget advisory, and strategic planning meetings, etc., on an ongoing basis. I feel that I'm letting down the voters of Saanich that were gracious enough to vote for me. The January 27th budget advisory meeting will be my last. I am so proud of the advocacy work that has been done in my time on the board and the boards before. Trustees, in my opinion, are an increasingly marginalized position, provincially and nationally, but ironically are often the most able to be the intersection voice for the system, the governance, operational, and provincial aspects. At the very heart of what we do each day should be a healthy, fully funded public education system that allows all our students to thrive and have access to the programs they need and deserve. I leave you tonight with immense respect for the work that happens each day in our schools, supported by our executive team, our administrators, our families, our CUPE staff, and Saanich Teachers Association members, and our excluded staff. The input from the Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils of Saanich and the Wasanich Nation is hugely important to our district. At the very heart of our districts are our students. To be a part of your lives in a tiny way as you find your feet, feel your wings, and hopefully soar has been the penultimate honor for me, and you are why we're all here. These past 22 months have been extremely challenging, and the flexibility and commitment to our students by you all has been outstanding. I would also like to give thanks to my colleagues on the board. It has been an incredible privilege to be a trustee here in Saanich, including my 5 years as chair. Wishing you all a 2022 that becomes gentler and gentler as the year progresses. Thank you, Chair.
I say thank you, Trustee Martin, but I don't really mean it, and I'm not going to rule on your point of personal privilege. When you quite properly and fairly connected with me today to advise of your decision, you asked two things of me. One, confidentiality, and two, that I would not go on at length after your announcement honoring your service. And so I intend to respect that, difficult though it is. You have extensive experience in the district. You have extensive experience with me and with other members of this board and staff in the district. And so there is much I and they could say, but we're not going to do it tonight pursuant to your request. There will be an opportunity. I intend to invite you as a guest to our February meeting, and there will be an opportunity to properly honor you by reviewing your service at that time. So thank you, Victoria. We are regretful to hear of your decision, but we appreciate that it's hard for you and it's a difficult moment. And so we'll move on from that.
Thank you, Chair.
Let's move, please, trustees, to item 3, the adoption of minutes of the board meeting of December 1, 2021. Are there any errors or omissions to the minutes of December 1, 2021? Trustee Homan?
Thank you, Chair. Regrets were offered by myself. I did not attend that meeting. That should be noted.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Homan. It was announced, but we will include that to the minutes. Are there any other errors or omissions in the minutes? Right. Hearing no others, I declare that the minutes will be amended with the notation, will be adopted as amended with the notation of the regrets offered for that meeting by Trustee Homan. Item 4 is business arising from the minutes, and that is the October motion to reconsider virtual meetings. Trustees, you will recall that in October there was a motion amended and passed as follows: that the board continue to meet virtually until January 2022, at which time the board will revisit the decision except for the board planning day in December. Trustee McMurphy.
Thanks, Chair. I have a motion to propose.
Yes.
I would move that board and committee meetings continue to be held virtually until the public health office order regarding staff meetings is rescinded, at which time they will return to standard practice.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Ms. Van Wel.
Holman?
Okay. If, speaking to it, Chair.
Yes.
We're in a bit of a hiatus or a quagmire or a no person's land or something right now. We can't really make a decision. in terms of our future. And that's why this motion kind of hedges our bets. Is just I think that as long as conditions are in schools are governed by the public health order, and as are we, I think we just need to stay the course until that order is lifted, and we can then go back to our standard practice, which involves, a variety of ways of meeting, virtual as well as in person. But I think we're accustomed to how we make that work, and we can, at that time, if that system isn't working for us, maybe we can try something else. But at least it gives us something to start with when the order is lifted.
Thank you. Trustee Homan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it would be helpful to just have a reminder of what that PHO's restriction is presently for staff meetings, just to have that clarified. First, thank you.
Superintendent, might you help us with that?
Yes, let me just find the wording here. I was just reviewing it earlier today.
I've got it here if you want it.
Yes, thank you, Trustee McMurphy.
Assemblies, gatherings, and meetings. Host gatherings virtually wherever possible. This includes large gatherings like school assemblies, staff gatherings like meetings or professional development activities. If the gathering must be in person, limit the number of people to no more than 50% operating capacity. That's not the whole thing, obviously, but that's the part that pertains to us.
That's the part that pertains to K-12 education. That's correct.
Thank you, Trustee Homan.
Thank you. Yes, and the second is a question. The motion as intended would still provide for, I believe our policy allows a trustee to attend virtually or by phone to an in-person meeting. So the wording of the motion wouldn't restrict or override that other policy. Is that correct?
That's correct. The motion to change the policy or a standing rule or order would require a notice of motion for us to think about it for a while. So that's a correct interpretation, Trustee Holman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further debate or discussion on the motion? If not, I'll put the question. Trustees, are you clear on the motion? Does anyone require it to be read? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving then to item 5, presentations, delegations, and questions. We have 2 presentations, trustees, this evening. One from the Coalition for Healthy Food and one from COPAC. And before we turn to healthy food as the first, I would gently remind all assembled of the policy provisions relating to presentations. One, they are to be 5 minutes, and I will generally keep them pretty close to that, folks, so please bear that in mind. Second, after the presentation has been made, trustees may ask questions for clarification of the presenter if they wish. And second and third, the business of the presentation is not normally addressed, debated, or discussed at that meeting. So with that, could I call please on Ms. Samantha Gambling from the Coalition for Healthy Food?
Sure. Hi there. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. I do have some cooking going on in the background, so if there's any issues, please just let me know. But I just want to say hello, everyone, and introduce myself. My name is Samantha Gambling. I'm the coordinator of the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which is administered by the Public Health Association of BC. And I'm calling in tonight from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples in Victoria, so just down the road. I was grateful to be invited here tonight to introduce the coalition and to invite School District 63 to add its voice to the growing number of school districts and divisions, boards of education, and other educational authorities who are in favor of a universal, cost-shared, healthy school food program for Canada. Next slide, please. So the Coalition for Healthy School Food is a growing network of nonprofit organizations from all provinces and territories advocating for public investment in a Canada-wide school food program that would enable all K-12 students in Canada to have access to healthy meals at school every day. The coalition was formed in 2014 and is hosted by Food Secure Canada. Next slide. The coalition's member organizations include those who operate breakfast, lunch, snack, and other school food programs across the country, as well as program funders, provincial and national health, education, and Indigenous organizations. And the logos you see here on the screen just highlight just some of our 50 plus member and endorser organizations in BC. So for example, in the Capital Region, member organizations such as CR Fair and Life Cycles offer food literacy education workshops and school gardening and farming opportunities to empower students to participate in their local food system. Next slide. The BC chapter of the coalition works to bring together these and other stakeholders from health, education, and food and agriculture sectors across the province to engage in collective action around school food, both federally and also on our provincial scale. Through advocacy, outreach, and research, we aim to ensure that federal and provincial governments are consulting and collaborating with school communities and those on the ground in the development of a publicly funded school food program. Next slide. So the reason that the coalition is advocating for a Canada-wide school food program is because around the world, school food is recognized as a valuable health promotion policy that has been linked with positive health and education outcomes in children from all socioeconomic backgrounds. In addition to benefiting health and dietary behavior, school food programs have been shown to improve critical food literacy skills that support local agriculture and promote sustainable food systems. Combined with poverty reduction strategies, school food programs can also alleviate the burden of food insecurity felt by families. Next slide. So UNICEF's 2017 report card ranked Canada 37th out of 41 high-income countries in supporting children to have access to healthy food. And today, 6 of 7 G7 nations have a national school food program that's at least partially funded or regulated by the federal government. Canada remains one of the only industrialized nations without a school food program. Next slide. But just because there's no national or dedicated provincial funding or regulation for school food programs in Canada or in BC, of course, doesn't mean they don't exist, as you all know. In terms of the current landscape of school food in BC, 75% of school districts report having a meal program in at least one school. And that's probably a low estimation based on who the coalition has connected with and talked to. These programs are run at a classroom, a school, or a school district scale, and they often rely on parents, nonprofits, or other members of the school community to develop and fund. So, of course, there are some incredible programs out there, but the current patchwork of programming doesn't reach all students, and it doesn't meet the needs of hungry or undernourished students. So the coalition believes that this cannot be improved without significant investment from federal and provincial bodies. Next slide, please. And that's where the work of the Coalition for Healthy School Food comes in. As mentioned earlier, we are advocating for a Canada-wide school food program that would enable all students to have access to healthy foods at school every day. But we're not just advocating for any program, we are advocating for a high quality program. We've learned from other countries, and we want to make sure that this program meets certain guiding principles based on best practices. And these guiding principles, as you can see on the screen here, include universal, which means that all students in a school would have the same opportunity to access a program in a non-stigmatizing manner. Health promoting means that the meals would ideally model the revised Canada Food Guide, focusing on the provision of whole foods and in particular fruits and veggies. Health promoting also refers to the promotion of healthy school food environments. So it's how you're interacting with food, not just what you're eating. Respectful and flexible to local conditions, meaning that programs are culturally appropriate and locally adapted. Ensuring Indigenous control over school food programs for Indigenous students. Connected to communities, supporting local food producers and local food economies when possible. Encouraging food literacy, meaning that programs are integrated with the curriculum through nutrition and hands-on food systems education, and guided by national principles to ensure conflict of interest safeguards. Next slide, please. So this is my second last slide. I just want to mention how can the Saanich School District support this work. I'm here today to invite SD 63 to join other school districts and other endorsers across the province and country, such as SD 39 in Vancouver, SD 33 in Chilliwack, SD 71 in Comox, as well as the Vancouver DPAC, the BC School Trustees Association, the BC Teachers Federation, and many others to endorse the efforts of the Coalition for Healthy School Food to advocate for a universal cost-shared healthy school food program. We also invite the Saanich School District to call on federal and provincial governments to commit to funding to school food programs for all K-12 students in BC and across Canada. Along with this delegation, I have submitted a letter with more information and links of examples of letters sent by other endorsers, if that's helpful for your staff. So next slide, please. Across the province, we know that there's need for increased funding to build on and support local school food programs, both to help address food insecurity experienced by children and youth, and to foster positive health and education outcomes for students and families. So by securing funding from provincial and federal governments, it would benefit these existing programs that you already have in your district and would allow for the expansion and creation of new local meal programs to ensure that all children in the Saanich School District have access to healthy meals at school every day. Next slide, please. That's it. So my contact information is on there. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Gambling. Trustees, are there any questions for clarification? Trustee Homan and Trustee McMurphy following.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Gambling, for your presentation. Will we be able to get copies of the slides?
Yes, I've sent them to Jason, so I think he'll be sending them out, if I'm correct.
Terrific, thank you. So the question that I had for clarification was, I appreciate one of the sort of suggestions to consider reaching out to federal and provincial partners. I'm just wondering, based on the endorsements or letters, notably the City of Vancouver, whether there's been any discussion either in the Parliament or the legislature around this topic in response to this, and whether our local MLA or MP or MPs and MLAs, whether there's been any uptake or presentation of this in either of those government bodies. Thank you.
That's a great question and very timely. Over the last year, we've seen unprecedented commitments to school food programs at both the provincial and federal levels. So provincially, we see a commitment to creating more local school meal programs, is the wording they use, in the mandate letters for both the Minister of Education and the Minister of Agriculture. And we know that the Ministry of Education is currently doing some research to explore what school food programs exist, and we're in regular contact with staff and hopefully the ministers as well. I don't know if it's regular, but we're in contact with the ministers as well and trying to push this forward at the provincial level. We know that there's this commitment in the mandate letters. And at a federal level, there's just been a historic commitment in the mandate letters of both the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Foods, as well as the Minister of Children and Family Development. And so we also know that it's going to go a couple different ways how the federal funding is going to flow, and that they're currently exploring that with support from the Canadian Food Policy Advisory Council, which was recently struck. So yes, there is definitely commitments at both levels, and the coalition is there kind of pushing to make sure that our guiding principles are respected, and that they're consulting with folks on the ground. As for, sorry to keep going, but as for the local MLAs and MPs, I would need to take a look because I'm relatively new to the island, so I would need to take a look. Am I correct in saying that Lana Popham is an MLA there? Is that so? She is? Okay, so definitely Emily Popham has expressed interest, and she is quite aware of this work of the coalition. And we're working with our staff to try and see what the Ministry of Agriculture's role would be in a universal school food program. And I'm happy to reach out to other elected officials. We are nonpartisan coalitions. We want to make sure we're reaching out to all elected officials and representatives.
Yes, Ms. Gambling, the other MLA for our school district is Adam Olson of
Oh, yeah.
Saanich North and the Islands.
Yeah,
So
I've met with Adam as well. Mhm.
All right, good, thank you. We'll go to Trustee McMurphy.
Actually, I think Ms. Gambling, thank you for your presentation. Ms. Gambling has already answered my question. I was wondering about how you bridge the constitutional divide, which is education being a provincial responsibility, not a federal responsibility. But obviously they're reading the emphasis on meals program rather than schools programs. So you're successful there already. Thank you.
Yeah, and honestly, the jurisdictional confusion, I think, is one of the reasons we don't currently have a school food program. There is a lot of back and forth as to whose responsibility it is. We are advocating for a federal provincial accord similar to the child care accord, in which the federal government would flow some funds through provinces, and that would go directly either to school districts or however the provinces decide to use that funding. And we're creating some recommendations for that. We're also advocating for a local school food infrastructure fund where the federal government could support the much needed infrastructure costs that are needed for a school food program universally.
Thank you.
Thank you, trustees. Are there any other questions? Well, Ms. Gambling, first, thank you for your work. Just in a few minutes, it's evident that you and your organization are very involved in this and are taking the time to get the word spread far and wide. You've named a number of districts who have already endorsed it. And so thank you for your time tonight, for coming to meet with us and to give us the information and the slides, which we look forward to receiving from the Secretary Treasurer as well. You're welcome to stay for the balance of the meeting if you wish, but we'll certainly understand if you wish to sign off and go back to your family or other endeavors. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. I appreciate your consideration, and I do have dinner waiting for me, so I'll say goodbye for now, but thank you.
All right.
Take
Good
care.
night. And our second presentation this evening is from our partner, COPAC, the Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils of Saanich. I gather, Mr. Craig Morton, will you be presenting?
That's correct,
All right.
Chair.
All right, Craig, it's your floor.
Thank you, trustees. We were tasked at our December COPAC meeting to put a question to our parent partners in the district as to whether or not to formally write to you to requesting that you guys support a vaccine mandate for district staff. And we wanted to share with you tonight the results of that survey that we provided to our parents, and then we will be following that up with a formal letter. So the results were, we had a couple of questions, and we got 744 responses. The first question was, do you as a parent support COPAC writing a letter to the school board in favor of a vaccine mandate? And the responses, while close, was in favor of us doing so. But we wanted to share with you this data as to that there is a fair amount of divide within the parents, but we had a majority in favor of it, and some people said they didn't have any opinion on the matter and said it should be up to the school board. If you go to the next slide, our second question was to ask the same question, but to write a letter to the province. And again, is around the same percentages of respondents voted in favor, so we will be doing that as well. And our third slide here was showing the breakdown of schools. So we were able to get a fair number of respondents from each of our schools. So indicating that there is a wide variety of differencing opinions. And this is when looking at the data that we received, there was actually, it wasn't even consensus within the same household. So there was a lot of differencing opinions of whether a vaccine mandate should happen. We had, I think it was about 55 of our respondents were from the same local IP address, and some of our responses were one yes, one no. So it's not a clear set of results, but we wanted to present to you to help with your guys' deliberations the facts behind what is going to be coming as our letter to you requesting that you implement a vaccine mandate.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Morton. Trustees, any questions for our friend, Mr. Morton? Trustee Homan?
Thank you, Chair. My question is specific. Maybe it's on the slide. I just maybe couldn't read it, but I'm wondering the timing, the date of the survey and the discussion, and specifically in relation to the availability of vaccines for the younger age group. When I look at that last slide.
This is for staff to be vaccinated, not for the students.
Right. But what my question is the timing of that in relation to when the vaccine for young people, for our students, was being made available. I'm just wondering the timing, sure. Recognizing that's not the policy that's being considered, but in the eyes of parents, whether or not the ability to vaccinate the 5 to 11 category, whether that was available. So I'm just looking for the timing of sure. when that survey was done, and letting you know why I'm questioning the timing.
Certainly. The questionnaire open to parents was circulated after our December meeting, which was around about the early December, and closed this morning. So we ran it for pretty much all of December and most of January. So it was open for just over a full month. And I believe at the time the vaccine was available for parents to sign up for their children. And I know for my own children, they were able to and had been vaccinated by the time the survey came out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee McMurphy, please.
It's okay. I've dealt with it. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Morton, trustees? Seeing none, Craig, on behalf of the board, let me thank you first for coming tonight and bringing us this information. We're all aware that this is a controversial and important issue for all our partners and stakeholders and parents, particularly around the province. Districts are starting to take different approaches to it, it appears, in a few cases. So we appreciate the information for any further deliberations we may have. If you intend to forward correspondence on behalf of COPACs, we look forward to that. And second, and of course, I expect you'll want to stay for the balance of the meeting as the COPAC's representative tonight. I want to take this opportunity again to thank you as I mean, there are so many parents. It's the biggest partner we have in that sense. But all our partners are so critically important, and we're glad for the work and the consultation and the representation that you give us as a board on behalf of the schools and the parents in the district. So again, thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Moving then to questions from partners or members of the public, if there are any. I'm not seeing any, and I'm trusting I'm not missing anyone with the limitations of my technology.
No hands up.
I'm sorry?
No hands are up.
No hands are up. All right. So that then, friends, takes us to the report from the chair. As item 6, I've already welcomed you as partners and guests and staff and trustees to this, our first regular meeting of the new year. But additionally, particularly in view of the continuing pandemic, I wanted to express the hope that the holiday break, for which both the superintendent and I provided a message of greetings, was restful and renewing for you with families, and that we all return refreshed to this work, advancing student achievement, individual success, and strengthening our communities. So despite the pandemic, we continue to roll up our sleeves and carry on with the critical work that is before us. Second, there was a time that I had hoped not to include a reference to the pandemic in the chair's report. And in reviewing my records, I noted that my December report was one of those, perhaps the only one. And I had hoped at that time, and said so, that we might be moving into the end of COVID and we wouldn't have to deal with it anything further. But unfortunately, it's still with us, primarily in the form of a highly transmissible, if apparently milder variant named Omicron. And its rapid growth in December necessitated further and different directions from the PHO and the Ministry of Education. These included, of course, the additional week before returning to school, January 10, to develop enhanced safety plans, and also a return to some of the features of our schools that we saw earlier in the pandemic, including staggered transition times, online meetings and assemblies, of course, hand washing, distance, masking, cohorts, and so forth. And the province is now facing prospect of functional school closures, where there may not be sufficient healthy staff in a school to keep it open. Fortunately, there have only been a few of those in the province thus far, and we hope we might avoid that in this district. All of this has required prompt planning and adjustment by our schools, and so I thank, again, Superintendent Eberwin and his team, school administration, teachers, support staff, and parents and families for the work, support, and cooperation. This has been compounded, of course, now by the surprise announcement of 2 days ago that local medical health officers may require vaccination information of districts, of their staff, in order to assess current situations. We currently do not face that here in Saanich, and I hope that one day soon we will not have to report on any response to COVID. We will recall that our strategic plan development for 2022 to 2027 is the board's major initiative at this time. Under the leadership of Superintendent Eberwin as chair of the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee, and with the assistance of our consultant, Mike McKay. You will also recall that in the fall, we consulted parent advisory councils and schools, Indigenous communities, student voice with respect to the plan, and specifically identifying the focus of the plan and its strategic priorities. At the direction of the board this evening, the superintendent in his report, I anticipate, will present a draft plan for our consideration in the context of forwarding it out for further community engagement, all in the hope that we might adopt it by March 2022. And so again, my thanks to those individuals and to the committee, and to, in fact, all of the participants who've responded, both in meetings and to the survey, to the progress thus far. December 8th saw the semi-annual planning day for the board, which was divided into two components. The first was a presentation of Indigenous cultural awareness, led by District Principal for Indigenous Education, Melissa Austin, with the assistance of Sherilyn McCrae. And while it included a number of facets, one of the most focused points was questioning individual biases and responsibility, leading to collective responsibility for implementing the recommendations and the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There, of course, were other features involved, including discussion of the enhancement agreement, the equity scan, the use of Indigenous language strategies and transitions. And it's timely, of course, because Indigenous learner success has been identified as a priority for our strategic plan. So I thank the board and I thank Melissa and Sherilyn for that. The second half of the day was spent with the board and senior staff under the leadership of BCSTA Director Gordon Lee in the board review process required once per term by policy. And this was to examine practices and functions of the board with respect to its effectiveness. Trustees will recall that Mr. Lee provided follow-up material which I have distributed, and it may be that we'll want to return at one time after these other priorities have been achieved to continuing those discussions. December 2 to 4 saw the BC School Trustees Association Academy held in Vancouver, which was the first in-person meeting of trustees and guests in 2 years. Vice Chair Vanwell, Trustee Silzer, and I attended along with Superintendent Eberwin. I won't take the time now to discuss in any depth that academy, but there was lots of meat and value, and it may be that Trustees Vanwell and Silzer in agenda item 13, trustees reports from trustee representatives may comment further on that. On January 13, the Individual Learning Center celebrated the graduation of the 2021 hairstylists class with 13 graduates in attendance, and I was pleased to be invited to record brief greetings and congratulations on behalf of the board for the event. And so I thank Assistant Superintendent McKenzie for those arrangements with the cooperation of ILC Administration Principal DeClercq and Vice Principal Ellis for this. The BCPC AGM is scheduled for January 27 and 28. It'll be held in the mornings of those dates virtually, and as the alternate representative, I will be attending on behalf of the board in place of Trustee Silzer, our representative, who is unavailable at that time. And of course, in the midst of all this, there have been a number of chairs conference calls with BCSTA, BCPC, and the ministry and chairs, primarily concerned with the pandemic. And finally, recent media provided and published an article noting the risk and the issue of burnout in leadership generally due to the pandemic. Excuse me. All of us feel the weariness, frustration, anxiety, and isolation arising from this over the past 2 years, and it's compounded for leaders in any organization, for it seems to be that the expectation is that they will carry on without demonstrating their frustration or anxiety or potential burnout or fatigue, and they won't speak of it, and they won't take a time out, but will carry on completing the work and meeting the challenges. In our context, the board recognizes this toll on our district leadership. It's present, I expect, in the leadership of our partners as well, and we acknowledge their stress, but specifically to Superintendent Eberwin and his senior leadership team, I confirm that the board is conscious of and sensitive to these risks, and thank you for your unending efforts in continuing the critical work that we all are here for in supporting student achievement in the face of these challenges. And the board wishes to support you and thank you and provide us encouragement as best we can in these circumstances as the work continues and as the pandemic continues. Thank you. That completes the report from the chair, and I'll turn to the report from the superintendent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Your words, as always, are heartfelt and sincere and greatly appreciated. Thank you for your kind words of support on behalf of the board for the work that goes on in our district, and it continues to be an honor to work and to learn here amongst some of the finest professionals I've had the privilege of getting to know. So thank you for your kind words. I do have a presentation, as I typically do here, that I'd like to share with the board this evening, and it is on the draft strategic plan that I'm bringing before the board tonight. But before I get into my formal presentation, I do want to offer a personal note of thanks to Trustee Martin for her service. But I also want to respect her wishes to not have comments made at this time. And in addition to that, we have one of our own moving on to a new career choice this summer, and I wanted to take just a very brief amount of time to acknowledge our Director of Instruction, Monica Braniff, and the tremendous work that she has done and continues to do with us for the remainder of this year in her role as Director of Instruction for Diversity and Inclusion. I got to know Monica when I first arrived here in the district about 4.5 years ago, and she was a district principal, and she continues to this day to lead with dignity and grace and with a tremendous amount of compassion for the children in her system, and a tremendous amount of dedication for the work that she does. And so we will have lots of opportunities over the next number of months to thank Monica properly, but on behalf of our team and the district, I want to wish her well when she heads off in a new direction as the Associate Superintendent in the Sauk School District. So congratulations, Monica. Tonight's report is about strategy. It's about the board's vision for student success in our district. We, as the chair has indicated, have spent the better part of a year analyzing data, looking at trends, both provincially and through the district and individually at schools. We have met with individual schools to talk about their school plans. We have met considerably with the community, and we have synthesized all of that information into a number of core themes. And one of the constant messages that we've been sending over this past year is we really can do anything, but we just can't do everything, because we need to focus on those objectives, on those themes that will make the biggest or the most significant difference in the success of students. And so tonight I present to you a draft strategic plan for the board's consideration. We have spent considerable time on this. I have two different formats to share with the board this evening. I want to acknowledge that we have our consultant with us, Mr. Mike McKay here, who is able to offer thoughts and opinions as well if there are any questions about my presentation this evening. Some preliminary points to discuss with you first. Really, an effective strategic plan is a document that provides everyone, staff, students, and our broader community with a clear picture of what our priorities are for student success. That the themes within a plan really are mini vision statements, if you will, which support the board's overall vision of student success. But these mini statements break it into manageable and actionable focus areas. They are broad and high level. They are key areas that address specific areas of student success, and they should resonate with our community. They should be memorable, and they should be relatable to who we are as a community. When we have a focused strategic plan, it helps to align our resources within the district. It prioritizes financial needs, and it engages with our staff and the broader community to outline what needs to be done to move student success forward. So this evening, I'm going to share with you two presentation formats, one that I'm calling an expanded or a storyboard format, where we talk about a district, where I show you some facts about the district. We give an overall executive summary at the beginning, what the board's beliefs are, the main tenets of the strategic plan, and an outline of the key action statements that are associated with it, how we operationalize it, how we measure success, how we adjust as necessary as we go forward, a conclusion, and then some optional messages potentially from the board chair and myself at the end of the plan. And then one of the key things that I think is important is that when this plan eventually does get approved by the board in whatever form the board chooses, that we have an ability to represent it in a poster format so that it can be displayed in prominent places and people can relate to it and see it on a daily basis and understand what the vision is for this district moving forward. And so without further ado, I'm going to present to you the storyboard format of the strategic plan. With a snapshot on the left, some simple numbers as to who we are with 8,000 students, 18 school sites, over 1,300 staff, and about a $100 million operating budget. The summary on the right talks about how we provide outstanding instruction through a variety of programs and services, and that we spent a year-long process of analysis, dialogue, and community consultation to come to this point, where we engage with students, parents, guardians, staff, the Saanich First Nation, and other community members to provide input and insights. And we settled on 4 themes: literacy, Indigenous learner success, mental health and wellness, and citizenship. And that these goals will remain constant over the 5-year term of the plan, but also remaining flexible and adaptable due to emerging information. So it'll allow the plan to be responsive within changes in our own Saanich Schools community. You'll notice that there are pink words throughout this with the word Sinchothan. One of the suggestions from the community was to have some translation into the local Indigenous language of Sinchothan. We are working on that process. Part of the challenge that we are having is that Sinchothan typically doesn't have words for things like executive summary and those types of things. And so we are working with elders in the community to come up with terms that are representative and appropriate. And it's taking some time to get to that point, but we certainly hope to have some language in here that reflects the local language of the community. This page on beliefs talks about the board's beliefs, which comes directly from Policy 1. And that has been approved by the board to help set the stage for what we believe in our community around truth and reconciliation with Indigenous communities, that public education is fundamental to our democratic society, that we have a responsibility to prepare young people to contribute to a healthy and diverse society, that it's a shared responsibility with our community, and that decisions made locally by boards of education and by the provincial government reflect the values and aspirations of our society. Healthy relationships are the foundation, and we share the responsibility for the health of our planet. So our strategic plan is a framework through which district decisions and directions are considered and initiated. It is our public commitment and acts as a roadmap. The 4 strategic goals are these: under literacy, to improve student literacy across the curriculum for all students with a particular focus on early learning. Indigenous learner success, to engage in practices that support culturally responsive and barrier-free learning environments for Indigenous students. And under mental health and wellness, to promote mental health and well-being through social emotional learning, trauma-informed practice. And the 4th theme of citizenship, to provide opportunities and experiences that inspire learners to be knowledgeable, curious, and active global citizens. Each of these themes has its own page and various action items. So under literacy, where we develop and implement a comprehensive K-12 literacy plan, initiate a grade 1 to 9 district literacy assessment, and address equity issues across the district to ensure that all of our students have access to comprehensive literacy instruction. Under the theme of Indigenous learner success, identify and addressing systemic barriers within our school district and acknowledging that our current system is in many ways not serving Indigenous students well. Increasing support for Sinchothan language instruction, and continuing to infuse Indigenous content and ways of knowing through the curriculum. In terms of mental health and wellness, teaching social emotional skills through effective use of curricular resources, increasing the capacity and professional learning for mental health literacy and evidence-based trauma-informed practices, reducing the stigma and barriers to mental health and wellness through increased staff and community awareness. And finally, citizenship, providing programs, both existing and new, to develop engaged, active, and socially responsible citizens, innovating to meet the diverse needs of our students while continually promoting equitable opportunities, and providing teaching and learning opportunities that build knowledge, awareness, and curiosity about local and global themes. How we operationalize it is by bringing this plan to life. That our plans over the 5-year term of this strategic plan will make sure that we are aligned within this process. Things such as budget planning, staff deployment, program implementation, professional development, and facilities usage all reflect the goals and aspirations of the strategic plan. Measuring success is critical. We need to evaluate the success of this plan on an ongoing basis, and we'll capture evidence both through qualitative and quantitative measures and reflect on whether adjustments need to be made to our measures and to the implementation of what we are doing. And in conclusion, we wrote a paragraph here of the board's acknowledgement and thankfulness for the cooperation and the engagement of all stakeholders and partners in the production of these themes and how they relate to the community as a whole. The pictures that you will see in this document are our own students and our own staff members, and we have chosen the pictures to represent the diversity of our student population, to represent the many different aspects from academic to environmental to sports and athletics to social emotional, trying to capture the diversity that exists within our system. This particular picture is the poster that we're proposing with the 4 different themes. I think this picture is a wonderful capture of the diversity within our system and the joy that is inherent within public education and the opportunities we have to enhance student growth over the 5 years of this plan. And so I have 3 recommendations for the board's consideration this evening: that we use this draft plan and the board approve it as submitted, that the board direct the superintendent to use the table 2 that was given in the last board meeting to engage with the community to gather feedback on the draft strategic plan, and that then the superintendent meet with the strategic plan advisory committee in March to provide a summary of the feedback and the preparation of any recommendations to the board at its March 16th, 2022 public board meeting. That is my presentation and my report this evening, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Superintendent. Before we get to the specific recommendations, I wanted to afford a brief opportunity, because I don't think we want to spend a long time on them, for any comments or questions to you on your presentation, if there are any. Trustee Homan?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent, for the report and the very picturesque, succinct presentation. I have 4 specific questions. The first one you've, I think, addressed partially. I was curious about the photo that is at the start of the report. Very cute, very nice photo. The t-shirt has some logoing on it that I'm wondering whether that's maybe something to reconsider. I think it says "I love New York" on the t-shirt of the little girl, and so I was just wanting to kind of point that out, and also sort of adding to that, wondering if representation in the photos and slides, or sort of the photos, might be expanded to represent, for example, music and art, or ILC sides, sort of a, and I appreciate we don't want to make it extensively longer, but maybe a collage or something that would enable as many as possible segments of the district to kind of see themselves within the report. Just a suggestion. That's my first. The second is, and I recognize that the board passed a motion at December's meeting. I wasn't there, but the message that's part of the strategic plan, I'm wondering if that could be expanded as well to reflect that it's coming from all members of the board, and maybe a photo of the board, again, to sort of extend the participation in the strategic plan in that way. That would be a second consideration. The third, again, was a distribution list that was to correspond with what the next step of consultation would be. And if I'm not mistaken, we had asked that this distribution list in the past include the community associations in each of our municipalities, as well as the Chamber of Commerce, if I'm not mistaken. So wondering if that was the case, whether that would be added, or whether you need a motion for any of these things. And fourth, the reference to global citizenship. I'm wondering, certainly support that, feel that, that's an important one, but wondering also, reflective that the board has taken initiatives recently to include students and their voice in our budgeting and in this plan. And I look at that as kind of local citizenship, or giving voice to the local students as part of our democracy. And I'm just wondering whether the global citizenship might be expanded in its terminology to reflect the importance of the student voice in their local experience in public education. Thank you.
Mr. Eberwin, do you wish to comment?
Just quickly, we have engaged with a professional photographer to take these photos, and we have had significant challenges during the pandemic. We still have more photos to take, but we have a limited supply at this time. So we want to make sure we're engaging with our own students. So we have tried to create a diverse array of photos, but we are limited with the supply that we have at the moment. Certainly a photo of the board could be something the board considers at the March meeting. I think that would be something likely to consider at that time in terms of formatting, or perhaps a feedback to the SPAC committee. The community list, I believe, does have the community associations listed on it, but we can certainly double check. And certainly with regards to the local student voice and citizenship, that would be great feedback for the engagement as well too, as we go out there to see if that's something that resonates with others as well too. Certainly we've talked about both locally and globally in citizenship, but certainly some wording we could take back to SPAC for that consideration as well.
Trustee McMurphy, please.
You're muted, Elsie.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent and SPAC Committee, for all the work that's gone into getting us this far. I appreciate the way the plan has evolved as we've gone along, which I think is a hallmark of the fact that our process is working, in that we've been able to gather input and make changes as we went. And I appreciate that. I have one question, and that is, with the recommendations that are before us, the board approved the draft strategic plan. And then we meets with the SPAC committee meets in March, and then recommendations to the board at its March meeting. I'm just wondering about, I'm not getting the feeling that that you want detailed feedback and recommendations or changes or motions or anything on this tonight, other than the sort of the in principle approval in principle to go ahead for discussion. Because those of us who aren't on SPAC, may want to provide more suggestions or more detailed advice. And I'm kind of torn between, doing it now so that it can be part of the discussion, or doing it afterwards when the discussion is kind of over. And I'm not sure what your advice is on that, through you, Chair, to the Superintendent.
It's a great question. In relation to your first part, yeah, the concept was that we would approve it in principle and go out for the community engagement and try and collate that information back. And certainly using SPAC as the collection vehicle, my vision was to have not only the SPAC trustees there, but other trustees as interested participants as well too at that time in terms of feedback once we hear from the community engagement process. My goal is to not spend very much time, if at all, wordsmithing tonight. If possible, but to go out and use the community engagement process over the next month and a bit to see what kind of feedback we get from the larger community at that time.
Basically, the question that's going to the community is, do you support these 4 strategic goals? So yes. We're not asking them to fine tune what we do with them or how we word them or the descriptions that we give to them or anything like that, right?
Right. It's more like, do these resonate with you? This is what we've heard from the community. Does this make sense for our community this time? Maybe a bit of a preamble in terms of the work that we've done in gathering data and feedback to this point.
So the fine tuning that the board might do would not necessarily reflect any major changes in direction as far as the community at large is concerned. It would be more direction to us internally as to how we proceed and how the emphasis that we give and that kind of thing.
I think so. Yeah. And okay. I think we would use the March SPAC meeting to help flesh out some of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But those of us who don't vote on SPAC are feeling a little nervous about without, I don't feel myself that it's appropriate for me to go to SPAC and move motions. I mean, I can't move motions, so if I want to affect some change, then I have to do it in March.
There wouldn't be any motions coming from SPAC anyways. It'd be recommendations, and so it's more of a communal conversation at the SPAC committee.
Yeah, but it'd be motions at the board table, though.
Correct. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Trustee Selzer, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent and Mike McKay. I'm really pleased with this draft, and I think it's a good way to go back to the community and get feedback on this, and then I agree with the process. So I'd like to put the motions forward. You want me to do it one at a time or the 3 at?
Let's, well, you've already spoken, Trustee Selzer, and I have Trustee Martin. So let's hear from Trustee Martin, and then I can come back to you to move. We'll deal with them seriatim to move the first one if you wish. Trustee Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair Dunford. I think the process of going out to community makes a lot of sense, and I liked what the superintendent said in terms of, and I'm wondering in the communication side of what's going out to our community, and this may have well been discussed, but I don't remember it, is, some of the questions the superintendent said, framing, this is what we've heard, does this resonate with you? Sort of that we, rather than, I think, my understanding is sometimes these consultations, people don't know what they're being asked to consult on, and they don't know kind of what the parameters of the feedback is. So if there could be a bit of a communication plan, I think that would be really helpful so that people are clear in what we're asking of them and the parameters of that. This is what we've heard, et cetera. And so I think a lot of what the superintendent said were great questions. The other part, it's similar to Trustee McMurphy, and I recognize, it's the chicken and the egg thing, which we often have with board processes. I do think that, the consultation comes back, and I recognize what the superintendent is saying is we don't want to wordsmith tonight, but somewhere in here, the board at writ large needs to have an opportunity to not only just accept the motion and move the process for you, but do some wordsmithing as a group to be able to say these are things similar to what Trustee Homan was doing. And so I would just respectfully just say, I hope we can find a way to do that. I think we need to, as a group of 6, it will be, find a way to look at this once it is all done. And I really appreciated the superintendent's the thoughtfulness about the photos. I know there has been times in some districts where the photo stocks have actually been just like stock photos, and I appreciate the thought that was put into it. And I think Trustee Homan's suggestions are excellent, but I also recognize we're dealing with a particular context. So I trust that staff and the professional photographer will do their best. I think the graphics are excellent and I'm pleased, but I would say to the board, I'd like to see this come back to the board one more time, or find a place where the board beyond the strat planning committee can sit down with this one more time. This is the board's plan, and I don't think we can lose sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I promised I'd come back to you, Trustee Silzer.
Okay, thank you. So the first motion is that the board approve the draft strategic plan as submitted by the superintendent.
Is there a seconder? Trustee McMurphy, thank you. Do you wish to speak further to it, Trustee Silzer?
Nope. I think.
Right, thank you. Is there any further debate, discussion, or comment from trustees? Trustee Homan.
Thank you. And I'm certainly supportive of the work that has gone into this process to date and the feedback and the report. In terms of process, my feeling would be that I would prefer that this go to SPAC so that we can hear from, again, the partner groups and the sort of have at committee that discussion. So I'm not prepared to support the motion at this point. I would prefer a process that went back to SPAC for further consideration of some of the questions that have been raised. And then it could benefit from additional input, which our board committee meetings don't provide for in terms of consultation with partners on the draft. And I don't believe that's been done at a committee level, perhaps a committee of the whole rather than SPAC. I don't know. But I'm not prepared based on the draft forward some of the questions that I've posed or suggestions for changes. So not that I'm opposed to the plan, but I think there are other considerations, including representation of the French language and other things, which I know we're not debating that, but in response to the vote, I'm just giving some insight as to why I won't be supporting it this evening.
Thank you, Trustee Homan. Any other trustees wish to comment before I put the question? All right, I'll put the question to the board that the board approve the draft strategic plan as submitted by the superintendent. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion's carried. Thank you. Trustee Silzer?
I move that the board direct the superintendent to use Table 2 community engagement process and timeline for the draft strategic plan 2022 to 2027 as reference to engage with the community to gather feedback on the draft strategic plan.
Is there a seconder? Trustee McMurphy? Trustee Silzer? Anything further on this?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Homan.
Thank you. For clarification, the list of individuals or associations for consultation, will that include the community associations in all municipalities and the Chamber of Commerce, which, as I recall, was added previously? Is that the go forward understanding, or would that require an amendment at this stage?
Before you answer, Superintendent Trustee McMurphy.
Oh, I was just going to say that the Chamber of Commerce is already there. The Central Saanich Senior Citizens Association is there. The North Saanich Residents Association is there.
So it's
There's
It's
several of them are
Central
there. And what specific ones are missing? I guess we need to know.
Well, there's a Central Saanich Community Association. I believe there's a Sydney Community Association. I think there is a Prospect Lake and a Saanich one as well.
Could we just add the words "and other community associations"?
Trustees, is there any objection to Trustee McMurphy's proposal?
Chair,
Trustee Silzer?
I think the trustees are referring to the wrong list because the motion is with respect to table 2 of which is the last, approximately the last half of the first page of the superintendent's briefing note. It's not the appendix 1 that we're reading.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I got all that wrong.
Well, we started out with it being of the wrong reference.
So what are we looking at then? I'm really confused now.
We're looking at table 2, which is
Sorry.
noted
Okay,
at the
got
bottom
it.
of page 1 and over
Yeah.
page 2 of the briefing note.
Yeah, got it. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Does that clarify things for folks?
Could we see it on the screen?
Are you
I don't
able to
have it
share
in front
screen
of me.
that, Superintendent?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So it is appendix 1 that I was referring to.
So this is table 2 that I presented in my last briefing to the board in December, and that's why I've referenced it again here. And the last section of the table was crossed out. That's why it says as indicated below in this part here. And it talks about the process of going to community and then to SPAC. But yes, Trustee McMurphy, you're correct. It does reference Appendix 1, which was the invitation list for community budget. And we identified some additional groups, and you're right, that's down here under Appendix 1 here. This is the here that you were reading from.
So if we just add "and other community associations," that would cover it, right?
Yes, if there's some that aren't listed there, that would certainly cover it.
Thanks.
Hey, trustees, is there any objection to including that wording on Appendix 1? Trustee Homan, I see your hand. Is that about this?
Yes, there's no objection to that, but an updated copy of the list would be helpful.
It's
Okay.
there.
No, with those amendments, with
Well,
the
it's just
added
one.
community associations.
Well,
It's just one amendment, Trustee Homan, to be clear. That and I can't recall the wording, but it was and other community. It was generic and inclusive.
yes,
To make
and
sure
other
it's all
community
there.
associations.
All right, trustees, that's the spirit. That's done. Let's return to recommendation 2. Is there any other debate or discussion on recommendation 2? Trustee McMurphy?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, all right. I see no hands, so I'll put the Trustee Martin. No, I'll put the question that the board direct the superintendent to use table 2, community engagement process and timeline for the draft strategic plan 2022 to 2027 as reference to engage with the community to gather feedback on the draft strategic plan, which we know includes Appendix 1. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Trustee Silzer?
Thank you, Chair. I move that the superintendent meet with the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee in March to provide a summary of the feedback and the preparation of any recommendations to the board at its March 16th, 2022 public board meeting.
Second. Trustee McMurphy. Trustee Silzer, do you wish to speak further to the motion?
No, thank you.
Is there any debate, discussion, comment on the motion? I'll put the question then. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Back to you, Superintendent.
That completes my report. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Superintendent. I wish to comment briefly on behalf of the board on one matter arising from your report, and that was the information with respect to Director Braniff. And publicly, on behalf of the board, even though these are early days, I wanted to first acknowledge her work in the district since, I believe, 2001, some 20 years, in many different capacities, from teacher to administrator through to the senior role of Director of Diversity and Inclusion. And so, Monica, on behalf of the board and publicly, I wish to thank you for your efforts in this critical role, and you will have big shoes to fill. Second, I want to congratulate you on behalf of the board of stepping over to Souk. Even though we think we're a much better district, we congratulate you on your position as Associate Superintendent there to Mr. Stinson and wish you well in that role. It'll be some time before you go, and we'll all have more opportunities to express our gratitude and our best wishes to you. But I wanted to take this opportunity tonight following the superintendent's announcement to clarify that and offer that on behalf of trustees. So thank you. Item 8, school successes are attached, and we'll move to item 9, committee reports, and first the Education Directions Committee with Committee Chair McMurphy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have one motion to put forward, that the board forward the school calendars for 2022-23, 2023-24, and 2024-25 for public consultation from January 20th to February 18th, 2022.
Is there a seconder, Trustee Selzer? Do you wish to speak to your motion, Trustee McMurphy?
Just briefly, this is a bit of a departure in recommending a 3-year calendar go out for consultation, and the other aspect of it is that considerable work has been done among the 3 districts in the Lower Island to effect a degree of coordination so that our shared community, our shared larger community, has some less challenge in figuring out when which days happen in which district.
Yes, thank you. And I think that was led by Assistant Superintendent McKenzie largely, right, Trustee McMurphy? And so our thanks to him.
Thank you.
Trustee Homan.
Yes, thank you. Just looking for an update. I know it was discussed at committee in terms of consultation with our WSANC partners in the local school board, First Nations school board, what the status is before this is circulated. Thank you.
Through you, Chair McMurphy, and to you, Trustee Homan, thank you for the question. At committee last week, you had posed that question. I just, before I spoke, I wanted to clarify and with Director of Instruction Hunter, just on whether that in fact had opportunity to occur. And I know Director of Instruction Hunter and I think Superintendent and everyone had been involved in some conversations. So Director of Instruction Hunter, if you wanted to maybe just briefly comment on that conversation and the opportunity that we had to reach out.
Certainly. We did meet with Curtis Olson from the WSANC School Board and shared the calendars with him for him to share with his staff members. And at this point, no concerns have been expressed other than just appreciation for sharing it. But if we do have any information back, we'll be sure to share it with you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, trustees, I see no other hands, so I'll put the question on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Trustee McMurphy.
Yes, we did have 2 excellent presentations on changing paradigms in secondary assessment from Sally Morgan, talking about the leadership and efforts that are being made in the district to change the way assessment is conducted at the secondary level. And then we had an interesting presentation on resources to support the functional school closures, which So far, so good. We haven't had to do. But I guess it's a, what is it? A ounce of prevention for a pound? No, what is it? Well, I don't know. Anyway, you know.
Saves a pound of the cure, I think.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, we're ready to go if we need to, but fortunately so far we haven't had to, and let's keep it that way.
Thank you. So that's your report?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move to Finance, Facilities and Technology with Committee Chair Vanwell.
Thank you, Chair. So our committee last week started off with a presentation from Director Henschel, and he updated us on the Refresh Ed program, the information technology program that we have going on, and there was lots of good news there about converting, to new technology in all of the schools. And I have, moving on, I have one item for recommendation in regards to the fiscal forecast and budget sustainability. The committee recommends, and I trustee move, that the budget for supporting strategic priorities of $338,744 be reallocated to increase the contingency reserve.
Moved by Trustee Vanwell, seconded by Trustee McMurphy. Trustee Vanwell, do you,
Thank you.
or do you defer to the Secretary Treasurer on this?
Secretary Treasurer, would you like to explain this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. A bit of background on this motion. In the fall, in October, following confirmation of enrollment, in my report on net funding from growth, I had reported that there was $338,744 that was available to fund other priorities. And at that time, the board passed a motion directing staff to come back with a report as to how those funds could be allocated to support strategic priorities. The reason for this motion, there are two reasons for it. The first is that our fiscal forecast is indicating we're seeing some escalation in replacement costs. Not surprising given Omicron, and there's some other concerns in just how the finances are trending. And so my view was that it would be prudent to increase our contingency reserve and just have a little bit more comfort going into 22-23 around the sustainability of continuing expenditures. And the other reason for that is that my view is that anytime we implement new initiatives, new programs, they need to be very carefully thought out, and they need to be part of an overall plan around the implementation of our strategic plan. For example, when we're looking at literacy, we want to look at every aspect of our literacy programming and have a good understanding of where do we need to make changes to move things along. So really our focus needs to be on the whole picture and not just the extra money that we're able to put into the program. And with our focus and the focus in schools almost entirely this month in January being on the operational implications of Omicron, it is just not a good time at this time to implement new measures. And so this motion to reallocate these funds into the contingency reserve effectively defers a decision on these funds to the budget consultation later in the spring. And at that time, we'll have a better understanding of the financial situation, and we'll also be further, we'll likely have a strategic plan, and we'll be further along in our understanding of how to implement the goals in the strategic plan.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Trustee Martin.
Thank you. And thank you, Secretary Treasurer Reid, for that explanation. This is related, I promise. I'm not too tangential. There was an announcement this week about additional funds for school districts. Do we know what the implications for our financial picture is for those additional funds?
Yeah, there was an announcement of additional federal funding to support ventilation in schools. Is that what you're referring to?
I thought it was a BC government education fund. I want to say it was 220 million. And it was to support implications of COVID in the classrooms, but maybe it was federal. I'm sorry, I came through the provincial government news.
I was hoping that was our share, Trustee Martin.
I was too. You know what, Secretary Treasurer Reid, I'm sure you will bring it back if it's good news for us and bad. So I may have misunderstood. I was positive it was BC, but you would know. So
there has been an announcement of additional funding for improvements to ventilation and to cover the costs of enhanced filters, which we're doing, and the additional cost of fresh air ventilation, because we are experiencing higher utility costs because we're bringing in more air from outside. So there was an announcement of additional funding to support those costs.
thank you for that clarification and correction of my information.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Trustee Homan is next.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and fully appreciate the reasoning in terms of moving this to the budget process. And I guess what my question is recognizing previous budgets have also, and the processes that lead up to that, have also looked at strategic priorities within the strategic plan. And I'm just wondering, specific to this money that was or maybe redirected to contingency rather than implementation of strategic planning, is the process of the budget and the sort of approved kind of implementation plan of the budget review, does that allow for the board's reevaluation of pulling back some money from contingency and redirecting it sooner, or is it all kind of tied to that next budget year? So I guess I'm just wondering is, as we move through it, or as additional information comes forward, does the budget process allow for a reassessment of this decision if it's passed in this motion?
The short answer is yes, but the other thing I should mention is in considering implementing new measures now. One of the, as you know, one of the things we're dealing with is potential staff shortages and making sure that we have the people we need in the positions to avoid functional closures of schools. And so creating new teacher positions or new positions for support staff at this time and potentially diverting staff from those positions currently in place is also something that we can't do at this time, and that was another reason for kind of deferring the consideration of this. But I think more broadly with the plan, that the strategic plan that is currently under development by the board, it is a strategic plan that is quite focused. There are only 4 goals, and that focus will allow us to make a significant change in each of those areas. And I think the phrase Dave referred to early on is you can do anything you want, but you cannot do everything you want. And having that focus in those 4 key areas is going to allow us to, or it's going to facilitate significant improvement in those areas. And I think an important part of that, which we'll talk about in our first budget advisory committee meeting, which is on the 27th, that will necessitate a shift in the budget consultation process. And I think an important part of that is not looking at how do we, if we can squeeze another few $100,000 out of the budget, where are we going to put it? But it's really going to shift the focus to what are we doing with the $100 million a year we're already spending? what are we doing in literacy now, and do we need to do things differently? And then after we've answered those questions, what are the budget implications of that? Does it mean we're deploying resources in a different way, or does it mean we need additional resources, and what is the most strategic way in which to allocate those resources? So it is going to shift the budget consultation process to focus a lot more on how does the budget support the strategic plan, rather than starting the budget consultation from the place of trying to identify what the priorities are, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Trustee Silzer, I had your hand up, but it's down now. Do you still wish to comment?
I just found that BC government announcement about additional funds, and I emailed a copy to all the trustees and superintendent and secretary treasurer.
Thank you for that. And Trustee McMurphy, I saw your hand up as well, but it's gone down now.
I was just exercising.
All right. And Trustee Homan, I see you for a second time, or?
Yeah, it's a follow-up, and I thank the Secretary Treasurer for the response to my question. There was one part of it, which was, if this motion passes through the budget process, can we spend money that's in contingency?
Alicia, you've muted yourself.
Oh, sorry about that. So it was a technical question that if this money goes into the contingency, and as we move through the budget process, recognizing it's going to focus on strategic priorities, is there anything that would prevent us from changing that allocation to contingency and spending it sooner? Somewhere along the way, as opposed to approving the final budget and then taking action? Would that be just a reconsideration of the board, or not?
Well, any decision of the board can be reconsidered. It's deferral to the budget consultation process. The intention of that would be to consider how to deploy those funds, and in 22-23, and even considering the big picture of our financial situation as well, having a better understanding at that time. But certainly as we go through the fall or the spring rather, and we get closer to the end of the year, we will have a better understanding of the financial picture towards the end of the year, and at any time the board can reconsider a decision like this.
Thank you. And Trustee McMurphy, you really do mean business now.
Yes, it's actually more a point of personal privilege than anything else. I didn't get Trustee Silzer's email that she said she forwarded to us, but that reminded me that I wanted to apologize to people. I'm having real troubles with my phone right now. So if I'm not responding to you, it's not because I'm not responding. It's probably because I haven't got your message. So just, I meant to say that at the beginning of the meeting, but bear with me if you're not hearing from me. You're probably glad anyway.
It may take a moment to Trustee McMurphy to come. I haven't received it either.
Okay.
But we can be patient, I think. Trustee
Chair, I could speak to that if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I did receive the email, and I'm looking at it now, and what this press release refers to is the government's funding of enrollment growth. So they often do this each year when enrollment province-wide is above their forecast. They need to increase their budget, and then they'll make an announcement about the additional funding that has gone into the K-12 sector. We've already reflected and accounted for this funding to the extent it applies to us, and as a result of enrollment growth that we've already reflected in our budget in the fall.
All right, thank you. There you go, Trustee Martin. Thank you, trustees, for the discussion and for your explanation, Mr. Reid. I'll put the question now on the motion as moved by Committee Chair Van Well. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. And Trustee Van Well, does that complete your report?
Not quite. We had 3 items for information where the first one we talked about the Prospect Lake traffic management, the work on the road in front of the school up to West Saanich Road work is starting in February, and so that will be an interesting time for the folks that are in that school. We got an update on the fiscal forecast. And the third thing was we spoke about the video surveillance in schools and how it relates to and how that's evaluated. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Moving to policy, in the absence of Committee Chair Stelk, that was taken by Trustee Martin. So are you in a position to lead us through the report, Trustee
Yes.
Martin?
Thank you. All right. So we looked at, I have 2 items for recommendation. So we looked at policy 18, recruitment and selection of personnel. But before I move my motion, staff, we're going to do some work on some edits and 1 addition. And I can't remember which trustee raised it. Superintendent, have those all been incorporated into the policy that's in front of the board now?
Yes, but I believe there is 1 small addition that still needs to be made that was pointed out by Trustee McMurphy, and I'm not sure if it made it into the board pack in time yet. And that was to, although it's indicated in section 2.13, where the Wasanich School Board is asked to provide their feedback, it is the Wasanich School Board needs to be added 1 sentence up around the consistency of the selection panel. So we will add that in as well. Just a very small addition to make sure that they're listed as part of the group, in addition to them giving their feedback.
Okay, so
Superintendent, everyone, it was added in the S drive for the board, just for their reference. It's not a meeting invite. Yes, it's in the S drive. The committee reports are.
Thank you, Ms. Glancy. And so, Superintendent, so what's in front of trustees now? Was it Trustee McMurphy? Was it you? So are those edits made as you had anticipated?
Yes, that's correct.
Great.
But I had 1 more question when it's time for questions.
Oh, okay. All right. So Chair, just a point of process here. So we're doing this a little bit. It's a little bit, normally the motion would come clean and we would just move it. I would move it, that it's as proposed. So I would imagine, Chair Dunford, we're taking questions first on these policies just to tie this with a bow. Is that correct?
I think what we want to do, Trustee Martin, is for you to move your motion, and then they can, if there are questions about that, they can be incorporated in that discussion.
Yeah, so Chair Dunford, my concern is that I'm moving a motion, the consideration of policy 18 as proposed, and what we're hearing is there's amendments to it. So go ahead anyways.
Yeah, I think if you move your motion, okay. For example, if Trustee McMurphy has a proposed amendment to the policy, that can be incorporated in your motion as an amendment.
Okay, so my first motion is the committee recommends, and I, Trustee Martin, move that the board confirm its consideration of policy 18, whose title is recruitment and selection of personnel, as proposed.
Is there a seconder? Trustee McMurphy. All right. Trustee McMurphy, did you wish to speak to this now?
Yes, please. I have a question, Chair. And it's with regard to the appendices. I'm assuming that they are part of the policy, and so questions would be in order. I just need to clarify that first.
Yes, they are. They're
okay.
As part of policy 18.
Okay, so my question refers to both of them, and I don't have it right in front of me, so I don't have the verbatim wording. But the first sort of criteria it says that the principal or the vice principal has demonstrated, I think, loyalty or words like that to the board, which I think is admirable. But I think that policy, almost by definition, excludes external candidates. So I'm wondering if it's appropriate to have it in there.
I'm reading it here, if I can, through the chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunford, it said, a principal will have demonstrated during their career and education commitment to supporting the interests of the board and district. It doesn't say this board, it says the board. So I'm assuming that that would be appropriate for other boards of education as well.
And then, so if that's true, then that's a question that we would, if it were an external candidate, it's a question we would have to ask of the current employer then? Because it says specifically they demonstrate, so how would we know that?
Well, yes, I think there's about 14 bullets there where they're asked to demonstrate in addition to that one, yeah.
Right. I don't object to it, I just don't know how we would do that. That's, you know, if it were an external person.
I see. I'm not sure if you're looking for a comment or it's just a question that you want to leave out there. I'm not sure what you're looking for.
Well, if there is an alternative that would allow us to sort of keep that in there in a way that applied to both internal and external candidates, then I'd be happy to leave it. But in the absence of that, I would be prepared to move that it just simply be deleted.
Trustee McMurphy, what about just removing the board? And it states, superintendent, it would read, if you remove the reference to a board, the board.
It would say a principal have demonstrated during their career and education a commitment to supporting the interests of, it would be the board and district or just the district?
The district.
Well,
I still think it's the same issue.
I think the intent behind that is that administrators are acting as agents of the board, and that's part of their School Act responsibilities. And I think that's what that is referencing, that you know, if the board has passed motions or made decisions, that they act in the best interests of fulfilling that duty. So I believe that's the intent behind that statement.
Oh yeah, I get that, and I'm totally in sympathy with it. I want them to be on our side. But it's just a bit of a conundrum as to how you assess that for an external candidate. That's my concern.
Well, perhaps we can think about that while I go to Trustee Homan.
Okay, and then I'll come back and move a motion to delete it unless someone can come up with some more generic wording. How's that, Chair?
It gives us a couple of minutes for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Homan.
I wasn't able to come up with anything. That's
okay.
Or I would have moved it.
Trustee Homan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's a process question. The motion before us is to confirm that we're considering this policy, and then the subsequent motion is making a notice of motion that will approve the policy in March as being proposed. But we're wordsmithing this now, and it's my understanding that that is done at the committee level. And we're now sort of engaging in sort of the work of committee at the board. And I guess I'm specific to the motion is that we're considering it, but now what we're doing is amending it potentially. So it's a process question as to whether we're sort of hinging in committee work.
So, Mr. Reid, can you help us with that? My interpretation might be that the board, in considering it, can consider changes to it as well. But Trustee Homan is suggesting perhaps it should be returned to committee. Do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, I agree. If there's a motion on the floor that the board consider the change, the board can certainly discuss discuss amendments to those changes or also decide to refer it to committee. So any of those items are open to discussion.
Trustee Selzer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any objection to that wording because I think what it means is that that the and that is the best interests of the board and the district, say, for example, in terms of strategic plan, that they have the context within which they're working. I think it fits. And I just leave it the way it is myself. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee McMurphy for a second time.
Well, I'll try an amendment. To amend it to say a commitment to supporting the interests of public education.
So the motion would read as proposed by Trustee Martin, and your amendment would then follow with the amendment of whatever you said. Right? Is that what your intent is?
Yeah. Right now it says, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Martin, proceed, please. Trustee McMurphy, if you have something to say about that.
Yes, I just, as I said, I was trying to make it more generic so that it could apply to both internal and external candidates. And I think that's about as generic as you can get. So commitment to supporting the interests of public education. And I think, as you know, we could say as defined by your board or as defined by the district's policy or whatever. But I think that just leaves it slightly more general so that one can seek that of all candidates, whether they're internal or external.
Thank you. Trustee Selzer for the second time. Nola, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. I guess I think the proposed amendment sort of muddies the water, or is just so generic as to be not really necessary, because a person wouldn't have gotten to where they, I mean, obviously it's a senior teacher who's applying to be a principal. They've been in public education probably for 10 or 15 years. They're committed to public education. So I don't, well, I guess I just stick with my opinion that you don't need to change it, that you're saying that yeah.
So you're opposed, Trustee?
I'm opposed. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I'm not seeing any further hands, so I'll put the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please show us. Opposed? The amendment is defeated. So back to a consideration of the motion as presented. Is there any further debate on that? Then I'll put the question to that motion that the board confirm its consideration of policy 18, recruitment and selection of personnel as proposed. All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Back to you, Trustee Martin.
And then I'm providing notice of motion. I, Trustee Martin, provide notice that at sorry, Trustee Homan, with your hand up related to the last motion.
I'll wait until you're finished. Thank you.
Is that okay? I can.
Well, no, let's deal with this because there is no discussion on the notice of motion. Trustee Homan?
I'll save my question until after this notice of, well, I guess I'm just looking to confirm that we have a policy that's in place, and that the consideration of this policy doesn't change our policy until it's presented back for approval. Is that correct? So we're operating under what's current policy, not what has just passed in that last motion, right? So there's some operational differences between what's before us now and what's on our website for policy. And I'm just looking to confirm that nothing changes until this notice of motion is approved as a change to policy, correct?
When it comes back to the board, you mean, Trustee Homan? I saw Mr. Reid nodding. Can you articulate that positive response, Mr. Reid?
Yes, and if I misunderstood the question, let me know. But I think the question was, have these policy changes been approved tonight? And they haven't. All that's been approved is the board has confirmed that the changes are being considered, and with that motion, the proposed changes will go for consultation for 2 months, and then it will come back to the board in 2 months' time to consider actually implementing.
Thank you for that clarification. And thank you, Trustee Martin, for your indulgence.
Great. All right. So I, Trustee Martin, provide notice that at the March 16th, 2022 public meeting of the Board of Education, I will move the following motion. That policy 18, recruitment and selection of personnel, be approved.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, is it a problem that I'm moving it and I won't be here to do that? Secretary Treasurer? Okay.
No.
Great. Okay.
It will require another motion for the actual approval in March in any case.
Okay.
Do you have any other content for your report, Trustee Martin?
No, just that we did, we had a glitch in terms of it for the policy committee seemed to be canceled until Tuesday, and then I think it got fixed, those lovely technology gremlins. And so we were going to look at policy 11 and policy 9, and you'll see they're on the future agenda items, the first and the second. So those will be coming to the February policy committee. And I think everyone on the committee was encouraged to look at other boards' works on those areas, and if staff wanted to bring ones that particularly resonated with them. And I think Trustee Homan was going to be sending through some comments on proposed changes she wanted to see in both policy 7 and policy 9. And then there is an ongoing list that people can see there. And that ends my report.
Thank you. Moving then to item 13, reports from trustee representatives. I'm aware of 2, and I think you're going to take the lead on both of them, Trustee Silzer. First, a report on the academy that I referenced in the chair's report. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you're correct. I didn't see Trustee Manuel disappear.
She has left us for the evening.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. And I will speak to the Academy as well. So first of all, I am grateful to Chair Dunford for agreeing to attend the BCPC 28th Annual General Meeting next week, January 27th and 28th. The meeting is now virtual. I think all trustees received the package of material from BCPC. You'll notice that the business meeting will include presentation of financial statements and the budget for this following year for the association. And there will be election of directors in 3 regional districts, Kootenay Boundary, Thompson Okanagan, and the Northwest region, and all 3 have only 1 candidate so far, and they're all incumbents. There are 2 special resolutions of pretty straightforward nature. The first is a special resolution that the BCPC bylaws be amended to move School District 35 Langley from the Fraser Valley Employer Regional Grouping to the Metro Employer Regional Grouping. That's pretty straightforward, and you can see the rationale there in the materials. And the other straightforward second special resolution is that the BCPC bylaws be amended to reflect school district name changes, and that School District 70 goes from being called Alberni School District to Pacific Rim, and Kamloops Thompson goes from having a I don't even know what that's called, you know, a slant thing between Kamloops and Thompson to Kamloops - Thompson.
Hyphen.
Yeah. So I guess we could bring a motion. Chair, do you want me to move that?
Well, maybe we can deal with it summarily, Trustee Silzer. I was going to ask if there is any objection to my, as the representative, supporting these at the AGM. Trustees, is there any objection to that? Trustee McMurphy.
I'm sorry, when you say these, are you including the budget?
No, just these two resolutions.
Those two, okay, because I have a question on the budget when we get there.
All right, so I'm seeing no objection, Trustee Silzer, so I think that's a done deal.
Good, great. And I guess what's the question on the budget, Trustee McMurphy? Or do you want me to walk through it?
My question is this, and it's a question not for you to answer tonight, but perhaps for you to ask at the conference. I note that they express in their revenue an amount derived from a profit on their meetings and conventions and training sessions and whatnot. And my question is, why are you making a profit on that type of an activity, which essentially we in the school districts are paying for? And it seems to me that they should be trying to organize conferences and things that are at least possible cost to our representatives. And so my question is, why do you structure them in the financial end of them in such a way as that it makes a profit for the BCPC?
I don't see, what line are you looking at? Because I don't see any profit. I see under expenses.
It's in the statement of operations. Sorry, a guided tour statement of operations. Let me just see if I can find it. Program and events revenue increased by blah blah blah, almost $30,000. And it says professional development, programs and events income, blah 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 blah. Anyway, it's in those notes that it says that they run the conferences in a way that they make a profit. And I totally get paying for the cost of them, but I don't see why they should be making a profit.
All right.
Because it's at our expense. Just a question for you to ask.
Yes, thank you. I will. All right. Anything further on that, Trustee Silzer?
No, thank you, Chair. I can go on to report briefly on the BCSTA Trustee Academy that you also touched on, Chair, and that was held December 3rd and 4th, I believe, or December 2nd and 3rd. Into the 4th, and generally it was nice to be there in person. The Minister of Education spoke as an introduction. As always, President Stephanie Higginson was inspiring in her words to the membership. And there were a number of presenters. In particular, there were two young women who spoke about their learning journey to becoming scientists. And then there was, I think, a highlight for me was hearing from the representative of children for children and youth, Jennifer Charlesworth, and her topic was creating belonging, helping children thrive. And she co-presented with a knowledge keeper for the organization, Yux Wellupton, and they told a series of stories that illustrated to the gathering exactly what they do in terms of advocacy, monitoring, and investigations in their agency. And it was, and also there was a very heavy predominant theme on Indigenous education, which was appreciated by all gathered.
Thank you.
And if Chair Dunford or the superintendent have anything to add, that's my report.
Thank you. Neither of us can improve on that. Thank you, Trustee Silzer. And appreciate you're probably pinch hitting really for Trustee Van Wel, who's had to leave, and so thank you for that. Trustees, are there any other reports from trustee representatives? All right, we'll move on. Thank you. There is correspondence attached. One relating to the presentation on food security that we saw today, and then one from the Office of the Controller General in response to correspondence that the board directed be sent. That takes us to item 15, our second question period. Are there any questions from partners? Sorry,
Chair,
yes.
Are we going to consider the requests in the letter from the coalition?
Well, you'll recall that perhaps it's a bit ambiguous, because the policy provides that with respect to the presentation, we don't deal with that in the same meeting. But we do have correspondence here.
Yeah.
And you wish to address that. So I'm going to defer to Secretary Treasurer Reid on the best process if we need to, if we want to.
Thank you, Chair. I was afraid you were going to say that.
Well, the food people got two kicks at the can, and so Trustee McMurphy says we can deal with it in correspondence, and that's probably correct, I assume. But
yeah, I think if there's correspondence in the board packet, certainly can be something that's there for discussion.
All right. Yes. So, Trustee McMurphy, back to you, please.
I'll move the three as a package.
All right. Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Homan, thank you. Trustee McMurphy?
I don't wish to speak to them. I think the presentation spoke to them.
It did well. Trustee Homan?
Yeah, I'm supportive, but just as a point of procedure, this is inconsistent. I know that there's correspondence, right? But we did have a presentation related to local food security as well, where we did automatically, sort of hold our discussion. And I think that there is benefit to defer this motion or refer or table it, whatever we need to do, because I think one, consistent with what we've done in the past, right? Which is not deal with it as business on the evening of the presentation. And two, I'd like to hear from our partner groups, and I'd like to do a little bit more research as well, because there might be additional things that we'd like to address either in the motions or subsequent motions. So I guess it's a point of procedure, recognizing that you've partially answered that and you're suggesting you're entertaining it under correspondence, but that is sort of inconsistent with, you know, the motion not to deal with the business for presentations on the evening of, which I think is for good reason, which is to submit it to committee or, you know, subsequent meeting.
Well, thank you, Trustee Homan. That, of course, was the issue that I considered and sought advice from our parliamentarian on. And the advice was that if we were dealing just with a presentation, I would agree with that. But because it's here in correspondence and our policy and our practices permits us to discuss and act on correspondence if we wish, then I have accepted the motion as in order for that reason. Trustee McMurphy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just to expand on our policy a little bit, I think the word normally or usually or something is in there. It does give us the opportunity to deal with presentations if we wish, and many of them we do because they are urgent or timely or appropriate or whatever. It's not universally exclusive that we do not deal with motions resulting from presentations. But I think you're correct in that, you know, that we've had this article in front of us as correspondence, and the motions are very clear, and I think they're very common throughout the district, or sorry, throughout the province, and many districts have already endorsed them. And I think that we've spent some time talking about it tonight, and I think it would be expedient for us to deal with it tonight rather than postpone it and deal with it at another time. So, I mean, if there are urgent things that are missing, we can deal with it at another time. But as far as these are concerned for tonight, I think they would probably suffice, and they certainly support our interest and our commitment to providing this kind of healthy beginnings and middle of the day meals for our kids. So I'm in favor of them.
Thank you. And to be clear, if I haven't been, I've accepted the motion on the basis of the correspondence, nothing to do with the presentation. Is there any further debate or discussion on the motion? Trustee Selzer? You're muted, Trustee Selzer.
Sorry, was it the motion seconded? I missed that.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Yes, Trustee Homan seconded it.
Trustee Homan. Yeah,
okay.
That's okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the question. All right, I'll put the question. All in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. Thank you. Moving then to, I'm seeing, let's see, Trustee McMurphy, are you done? Your hand is still up.
I was going to put my hand down, but if you want, I'll move receipt of the letter from Mr. Fisher.
Yes, is there a seconder to that? I'm not seeing a seconder, Trustee McMurphy. Or Trustee Homan? Trustee, I see a hand, Trustee Martin, and a head shaking. So are you seconding? Yes, she is. All right, thank you. All right, Trustee Homan, your hand is up. Is it with respect to the motion to receive the Controller General's letter?
My hand was up with reference to the motion that just passed, and was just wanting to confirm that as business arising at the February meeting, additional motions could be raised on this topic, correct?
If it's business arising from the minutes, that would fit the category, yes.
Very good. So I'm just giving a heads up that that's likely what I will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And is it necessary in our procedures to have a motion of receipt? It's already on the agenda. The agenda was adopted. The letter is there. My experience has been that that's a redundant motion. I'm just looking for clarification on whether we need to move receipt.
I think you're right. I think the Secretary Treasurer told me I was out of order the last time I did it, and I forgot.
Yeah, but you keep persisting, Trustee McMurphy.
No, it's just a habit. That's how you deal with correspondence. You move receipt and get it out of the way.
All right. Thank you, Trustee Homan. Is that correct, Mr. Reid? We do not need that motion?
Correct. It's not out of order, but it's not necessary.
All right. Board, is there any objection to withdrawing the motion? Seeing none, the motion is withdrawn and gone. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us about that. Let's turn to item 16 as we approach the end of the agenda. Other business is submitted, and that's the advocacy plan. Mr. Reid, please.
Thank you, Chair. I included a brief briefing note and highlighted that the policy 2 in the board's policy manual includes that the board shall develop an annual plan for advocacy, which includes focus, key messages, relationships, and mechanisms, and that the annual board work plan includes that this will be approved in January. The board hasn't approved an advocacy plan before, and historically decisions related to advocacy have been determined either by past practice or response to particular events or circumstances. The inclusion of an advocacy plan was an addition in the development of the new policy manual, and it recognized that advocacy is a key role of the board, and that it should be done in a planned and strategic manner. So I don't have a particular recommendation, but I did have some thoughts around next steps. And my view was that an advocacy plan, developing an advocacy plan necessitates a forward-looking and planned approach that is strategic, and in my view, a necessary step before embarking on developing an advocacy plan would be that the board complete its development of its strategic plan so that the board knows what its priorities are and then is positioned to consider the role that advocacy plays in furthering those priorities. As the board hasn't developed an advocacy plan before, and I believe it is a complex undertaking, at least not a straightforward process. An option that the board may want to consider is including it as a topic for a future board planning day where the groundwork for its development could be considered.
Thank you. Discussion, Trustee Homan.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the Secretary Treasurer for bringing this forward as part of our work plan and the insight he's offered. I would move that we refer this item to a committee of the whole discussion to take place in the near future and to enable consultation with our partner groups.
Is there a seconder to the motion for referral? Trustee Martin?
No.
All right. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Trustee Homan?
Yes, thank you. I think that we would benefit by a board discussion at the committee level to look at letters of advocacy that we have sent in the past 12 months, look at strategic plan, look at current issues, for example, budget, and have that discussion around sort of relevance in the current state, but also process, given the Secretary Treasurer's comment that this is kind of the first time round. I think it would be good for us to kind of understand how the board's feelings are, as well as the partner groups in terms of how to move forward in this important area of advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Martin.
Thank you, Chair Dunford. I support the committee of the whole as a structure for this conversation, and to have the partner input. And I would respectfully say I think we need to look beyond the last few years. I mean, there have been times in public education where there have been some pretty significant roles of advocacy. And just a note out of respect that I won't be here, and I really appreciate the frame of reference the Secretary Treasurer has given us in his briefing note. I would respectfully say that I think there needs to be openness maintained in the advocacy plan, because there are things that may evolve. Like, I'm just using food security as an example that we've talked about at the board. There may be things that happen locally and provincially that the board needs to respond to as an advocate. And I would hate that we are limited just to our strategic plan. So I would respectfully say committee of the whole structure would maybe be a good place to start as a part of the process, and to keep it. I completely agree with the Secretary Treasurer in terms of a foundational part being our strat plan, but do not limit it just to that, because in my experience, there have been times where there are things that are just, and as yours too, Chair Dunford, that thrown at boards you have to respond to that don't tie to strategic plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee McMurphy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think thanks to Trustee Homan, I think that committee of the whole is a good idea, particularly I know our committee of the whole discussions with regard to the budget have been very successful, and including participation from the partner group. So if we could use that as a bit of a model, I think it would be healthy and wise. I just echoing a little bit of what Trustee Martin said. I think that you know, we could find ourselves, in fact, in our budget committee of the whole this spring, actually resolving ourselves into an advocacy committee of the whole, because God knows what's going to happen with our funding. So, you know, I agree with the notion that we have to, when we start looking at our advocacy plan, we need to be open to the option, I guess, of having advocacy outside of the specifics of a strategic plan. So, but I think all being well, the strategic plan is a great place to start. So let's hope that's all we need to advocate for.
Thank you. Trustee Silzer.
I agree with the comments. Well, first of all, I agree with the approach of the committee as a whole, and I also appreciate the Secretary Treasurer's briefing note on this and the approach. And I think what we're all talking about is that advocacy is both something that you are proactive about. For example, when you have a strategic plan and you want to be active in your advocacy for, let's say, mental health or Indigenous education or literacy, and its advocacy is also being responsive and reacting, responding to the things that arise in the course of our work. So I think we're on the right track to keeping our word as to having an advocacy plan in the first place, and then having the process to actually turn our minds to that. And then once we're turning our minds to it, then we'll be able to sort out whether we need a plan for actually going forward and having something that we can plan for, and also having some kind of process, which we do have already, I guess, to respond to things as they come up. So I don't know where that leaves us right now, but I guess there doesn't seem to be very much time right now to look at it. So I'm in favor of actually looking at this again after the strategic plan, just so that we have a few months to get that off our plate, and then to look at an actual advocacy plan in light of the strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have myself on the list as well. I support the concept of referring this to the Committee of the Whole. The motion does call for that to be established, as I recall the wording, within the near future. So I think that we're compelled to try to organize that probably before the strat plan is completed, if the motion passes. I do think that it's designated an annual advocacy plan for a number of reasons. One is that probably the board will face different issues, as has been pointed out by others, from time to time in different years. And so the plan will have to grapple with those issues as they exist or as they may come up in that particular year. A second feature, of course, is the process to deal with that. And a third may be the strategies. And so it does seem to me that it involves identifying those areas in which our advocacy is immediately required that year or expected to be required, as well as the process and strategies. But I wanted to make that clarification, Trustee Selzer, about timing, because the motion as it does read would require us to try to arrange that and conduct that in the near future.
Sorry.
I'm
Chair,
not. Sorry, Trustee McMurphy.
Sorry, did you just say that you thought that the advocacy planning would have to happen before the strategic plan was adopted?
All I was doing, Trustee McMurphy, was pointing out that Trustee Homan's motion, seconded by Trustee Martin, proposes that it be referred to a committee of the whole to be held in the near future.
Which is pretty vague. It could be after the strat plan's developed, right?
Depends how quickly we do it.
Yeah.
Trustee Homan?
Yeah, the intention was to do it as soon as possible, but leaving it as, in the near future was more to give staff the opportunity to, schedule that, whether that's February or March. The intention was not to, leave it until after the strategic plan, but rather to further the work of the advocacy, which I think is consistent with our work plan. We have a work plan, we try to stick to it. And it's not contingent on the strategic plan, it's part of our board work plan. So if you'd like me to change it, it would be, to have a committee of the whole in February or March is kind of what the intention of the motion.
Thank you for that. Back to you, Trustee McMurphy.
So I'll move an amendment then to replace the words in the near future with after the strategic plan is approved.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Trustee Selzer. Do you wish to speak further to that, Trustee McMurphy? Is there any discussion on the amendment? Is there any discussion on the amendment to hold the committee of the whole meeting after the strategic plan is approved? Trustee Homan.
It's my understanding that the work plan is part of our board policy and that we've sort of set that out as a structure for our work. And I appreciate that we're doing that work this evening. I will not support sort of putting it off until after the strategic plan is approved. I think that we're carrying out other business of the district, and we should continue that as well, but not leave things until the strategic plan is tidied up or, complete.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, I'll put the question on the amendment from Trustee McMurphy, effectively to call the committee of the whole together after the strategic plan is completed. All in favor of that amendment, please signify. Opposed? And the amendment is carried. Thank you. Now returning to the motion as amended. Is there any further discussion on that? I'll put the question then on the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried. We have no items for information. It's that time of the night. Is there any objection to, whoops, I see Trustee Homan.
Yes, and I apologize, Chair. I should have maybe addressed this at the adoption of the agenda, but it wasn't in my notes at that stage. But normally there's a tracking of motions passed, work underway that forms part of our agenda, and I didn't see that with tonight's agenda, and I'm just wondering, was that just overlooked, or has there been a change?
Mr. Reid, can you help us with that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It is not on the agenda, but it is typically in the package. On the network, is it not in there?
Trustee Homan's correct. I think I didn't see it.
I didn't see it.
I don't see it either. We'll add it tomorrow.
That's okay. It was just an omission. I'm sorry. I'll add it tomorrow. It is done. I'll pop it in there tomorrow morning.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Glancy. Trustee Silzer?
Oh, sorry. I thought I saw one in the in-camera agenda.
Yes, there is one for each, so it just maybe missed the regular one. Sorry. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, trustees and staff, for all the work this evening. Is there any objection to adjourning the regular meeting at this time? Hearing none, I declare that we have adjourned the meeting at 9:33 p.m. Trustees, thank you. You'll recall we're returning to our recessed in-camera meeting in just a moment, and we'll finish that. So good night to
Thanks everybody for hanging in there.
partners, guests, staff, and trustees. Good night.
Good night.